Hi listeners, Jason here. We're on the countdown to PHSCon 2025, where we bring some of the leading experts on the topic of psychosocial safety to Sydney for 2 full days on the 19th and 20th of June. With so many great speakers, industry case studies and networking opportunities for the 500 people in attendance, it is the psychosocial safety community event of the year. Highlights will surely include live podcast recordings with Adam Grant and Professor Rob Reiner, international insights from Mary Ann Bainton, Dr. I. David Daniels, Peter Kelly from Canada, the US and UK respectively, as well as entertainment from Jimmy Reese OAM. That's right, we've even got Jimmy Giggle. Early bird pricing is available for a limited time, so get in quick to secure discounted tickets for the conference, pre-conference masterclasses and the VIP dinner. Now, on to this episode.
From Flourish DX, this is the Psych Health and Safety Podcast. With workplace mental health becoming a safety prerogative, this is the source of information on psychological injury prevention and health promotion.
Hi, and welcome to the Psych Health and Safety Podcast. My name is Jason Banshee, and I'm one of the hosts of the show. The aim of the podcast is to rapidly increase the knowledge and application of psychological health and safety in workplaces worldwide. To help with this, we have regular guests from around the world who are leading the way in this important area. But before I introduce our guest and topic for today, allow me to introduce my co-host, Joelle Mitchell. How are you today, Joelle?
I am looking forward to the long weekend that we're about to get into.
Yes, we're recording on the Friday before the Australia Day long weekend. So yes, me too. What are you going to be up to?
I'm hoping to sleep quite a lot.
Yeah.
I might go to my local bookstore and get a couple of books.
Mm-hmm.
We got our son a new bike, so we'll probably take him out somewhere to get his legs on that a bit.
Yeah, you're riding distance to Kings Park, I guess. And
Yeah.
yeah, nice.
What about you?
We got some people coming around on Sunday for a barbecue, as you do for Australia Day. I think there's quite a few people coming around, so...
Now that you've got a giant house and a pool, and
yeah, everyone wants to come over now that we've got a pool.
Yeah.
Yes, and it's been quite hot in Perth, so it'll be nice to cool down and catch up with some friends.
Yep.
So all the people we missed for New Year's when we last hosted.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll be good fun.
Nice.
Cool. Well, hope everyone else had a great Australia Day.
Yeah, this will come out a while after that, I think.
Yeah, we've been recording quite a bit.
We have been, yeah.
Yeah, and still got some good episodes to come.
We sure do.
But this is a really good topic. We've spoken with Angela Martin before on a related topic, so it'd be good to talk about it again, open it up with another researcher in the area.
Yep.
So we should let her in.
Sure.
Cool. So she's an entrepreneur and small business owner, having won several small business awards in New South Wales and nationally. She's recently completed her PhD focusing on mental health in sole traders and micro business owners. She now works as a small business mental health expert through her company Fortitude at Work and is the owner of Rereadable, a business bookstore. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Leanne Faulkner.
Oh, thank you for having me. Hi, Jason. Hi, Joelle. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. And we do go through so many LinkedIn messages and ask people to come on the podcast. And I'd forgotten that I was actually the one that asked you onto the podcast after seeing your research online. So I apologize for that. But really, this obviously it's something that caught my eye and really interested to unpack this with you today.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm actually really excited to be here, and I had to go and do a bit of prep so that I made sure I knew my stuff, because I have listened to your podcast and I know I do need to be on my toes. So I hope that I've done enough homework to do myself justice.
And I'm going to let the listeners know we're really disorganised because it's the beginning of the year and we're still getting back into the swing of it. I didn't even send the agenda to Leanne, so you're going to hear how much of an expert she is because she has not got the questions in front of her. And she did not do the research on the questions I'm going to ask her.
That's true, but I think, having recently defended her PhD thesis, she's probably fairly well equipped to answer our questions about her research.
I would hope so, yeah.
Yes, I hope so too.
I'm sure we'll be kinder than the panel was.
Oh, good. Please.
Something that they probably didn't ask you. What podcast do you like to listen to?
Oh, well, actually, I like to listen to, look, I'm the sort of person that you don't sit next to on a plane or at an afternoon tea because I'm pretty boring. I'm very focused on small business. So I like to listen to podcasts that offer very pragmatic advice and support to small business owners. Of course, yours is in the mix, I have to say. But I'm a big fan of podcasts that offer skill and encourage competence development in small business owners, because I understand the link between that and stress reduction in small business. So I'm particularly interested in podcasts like the Her Business podcast, the Content Sells podcast. I enjoy bio podcasts, stories about other small business owners. I understand the value that comes from them. So I've probably given two, but there's a variety, but within one niche.
All I heard was the Psych Health and Safety podcast in that mix. So.
Of course you did.
No, there's some good tips.
Yes, and as a small business ourselves, it's probably useful that we understand these things.
Yeah, we've got ambitions not to be a small business.
Well, yeah, but we are where we are right now, right? It's a long way to go.
I think we might officially be medium size. Actually, on procurement stuff, we are now medium size.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Tell us, please, about your professional career.
Yeah, sure thing. Well, look, back before dinosaurs roamed the earth, I had a corporate career. I worked in very senior management positions for large organisations, and typically in the HR, OD area. I have a degree and a master's in adult education, adult learning and development. So that was it. But, after working 7 days a week, many years, funnily enough, met my partner, realised there was more to work, and ended up in the small business space. And in that space, I was the founder of a skincare brand called Billy Goat Soap. So I built that from my kitchen through to, a couple of factories and a much bigger business. But that actually came at the cost of my mental health, the year on year. And so as the business was growing substantially, we were really starting to feel the effects. This is back in the day. I'm going to age myself now. We're really starting to feel the effects of the GFC, and so the flow-on effects in retail. And so even retail slowed, our growth slowed. I had to make some very hard decisions about navigating that as a small business owner, and in fact ended up having a breakdown and unable to work. And that was so not on my radar at the time. I'm sure it's not for anybody at the time. But because I had depression, I had insomnia, I couldn't sleep. So I would sit at my computer, quite literally 11, 12 o'clock at night, and I would put into Google small business owner not coping, entrepreneur and stress, small business owner and distress, and found that there was nothing out there that actually spoke to me. There was a lot out there that talked to the general public or an employee, but as you would know, as a business owner, the stakeholders that are involved in the way you run your business and the people that you're connected to make that business work is very different to the experience of an employee. And so I felt that there was nothing out there. And if I couldn't work, I really had the weight of the world on my shoulders. I felt responsible for everybody. And in addition to that, I was feeling like I was probably the only person that was not getting things right, because the only thing I read in the paper are successful entrepreneurs and models of success, and not a lot of models or not a lot of discussion normalizing the realities of working in small business.
It's just like journal publication, right? Like,
yeah,
they only have positive results that you get published.
That's right. That's exactly right. So anyway, this is back in the day, 2012. I just did a quick strategic plan on a piece of cardboard, rolled it up, drove to Canberra, met with Peter Strong from Cosboa, and kind of went, there's a lot of things, there's a lot of discussion out there for employees, but I think we need to do some more for the actual business owners, not necessarily the employees, but the people who own the business. And Peter at the time said to me, totally agree, what can we do? And I have to say that from that initial conversation, I ended up working and representing small business and Cosboa on the Mentally Healthy Workplace Alliance. And I was on that alliance for 7 years, I think, 6 or 7 years, talking about small business. I had met Dr. Angela Martin when she first started rolling out a program in this space. Business in Mind that was, and I was actually a participant on that program, and so that gave me some exposure to thinking about what mental health meant for a small business owner. I eventually sold Billy Goat Soap, and I became, I guess, a little bit determined to try and have more discussion around entrepreneurial and small business owner mental health at the graduate level. I'd done some teaching previously for the University of Newcastle, so I went back and started to harass them. And they said, look, put your money where your mouth is. Why don't you write a program for us as part of the innovation and entrepreneurship undergrad degree, which I did, of which part of that addressed workplace mental health. And so I taught at the uni for many, many years until just recently. I taught small business growth and development, and decided that I would take a deep dive and complete my PhD. And so for the last 5 years, I've been looking really at understanding the psychosocial hazards that may in fact be unique to sole traders and micro business owners. Because I found myself through my time on the Mentally Healthy Workplace Alliance and looking at the NWI and how that came along, and then looking at all the other models as a result of doing a lot more research in this area, constantly saying, but what about business owners? What about people who don't have employees? What does that mean for them, and what does that look like for them? And that was really the start of my research.
Yeah, I think I love having people on who have a bit of a varied background, because I think a lot of our listeners really think, well, I want to work in this area, but I'm not an organizational psychologist, so I can't do it. So it's always really wonderful to have people like yourself showing that kind of different pathway into this work.
And can I just say, Joelle, I think that's an excellent point that you raised, because since about 2012, 2013, I have worked as a small business mental health advocate. So you name it. If there's been parliamentary roundtables, I've been there. If there's been something that Beyond Blue are doing with New Access or whatever, I've worked on that. I've worked with Every Mind. I've been fortunate in that I've had, I kind of like a helicopter view of what's going on. And so often the people that I would sit next to in these consultative type roles would be people who came from health. So would be people who had expertise in the health sciences. And I would increasingly think we need to have more business representation here if we're talking about business people. And we need to have more academics that are coming from business schools and talking about it and collaborating with health sciences. So when I actually did my PhD, that was a pivotal decision point for me, was I going to do it with the School of Health, or was I going to do it with the School of Business? And I made a choice to do it with the School of Business. And I actually think when I started talking about this area around psychosocial health, it was a completely different field or domain for the academics that were sitting in the business sector. It was like I was talking a different language quite often, whereas it would have been very comfortable and easy for me to work within the School of Health because they were my people. Like I understand. They understood me, I understood them. But I really wanted to have that cross-pollination of ideas. And we need to bring entrepreneurship to the table to collaborate in this area. And so I chose that. And I feel actually very fortunate in that I stand at this intersection. And not only that, I have this lived experience. So I'm probably more a small business person than an academic. Does that mean you're going to kick me off the podcast?
No, definitely not. We certainly interview a wide variety of people, including small business owners, leaders, practitioners, tradies, all sorts. If you've got something interesting to talk about, we will be happy to talk to you, regardless of what you call yourself.
Oh, what about Ben? That was interesting. The content.
Yeah, the social media manager. Yeah. That was an interesting one. Yeah. So yes, we talk to all kinds of people.
Yeah. But Leanne, as a fellow entrepreneur, I also was doing an e-commerce business, or it was an e-commerce business when the GFC hit. So you're not that old.
Okay, good. Excellent.
Tell our listeners can probably guess, but what are your main areas of research that you focus on?
I specifically look at the psychosocial hazards that, as I've already said, that may in fact be quite unique to small business owners, with a particular focus on micro business owners and sole traders. There is quite a lot, there's more understanding around small business, but the distinction in micro business and sole traders, understanding that subset within small business is an area that I'm particularly interested in. And the reason that I am is because 64% of all businesses in this country actually don't have employees. And yet we have these models talking about workplace psychosocial health and how we might go about managing employees when over half of the businesses actually don't have them. And so that's the area that absolutely fascinates me, because nowadays I am a sole trader. I work alone, I work at home. And so I believe that all of us have the right to work well, not just employees in a business, but the people that run and own the business have equal rights.
So besides your own work that you're putting out into the world, is there any other resources around psychosocial health within those business owners or micro businesses, as you say?
I think we're getting there, to be honest. I think we are. So I do like Ahead for Business. I'm going to sound biased because I was actually a founding consultant on Ahead for Business. I still like it because I think Ahead for Business is recognising that there are micro businesses out there and not just small business. So I think some of those resources are good because they speak to that. I think the other thing that they've done well at Every Mind is begin to think about association or industry-based resources. And I think that that's one of the reasons why we don't necessarily have this coherent national tweak of the framework, and I'll probably get to that later, but why we don't have that is because micro business owners tend to be across a range of industries, so we're quite diverse. And I think Every Mind and Ahead for Business are actually beginning to recognise those differences, which is great. I love, and I tell everybody about it, because quite often, if a small business person hears that I work in the area of mental health and small business, they might say, oh, can we have a Zoom meeting or a catch up to, see how you're going? But really it's to talk about stress at work. And one of the resources I absolutely love is the New Access program, the Beyond Blue New Access program. I think that that's absolutely golden, and I'm so happy to see that it's receiving continual funding. I think that's brilliant. I also particularly love the Small Business Debt Helpline, and I'm really thrilled to see that that's had ongoing funding as well, because I think it's very well deserved. So those resources, yes, but we have an awful long way to go, particularly when we start thinking about the business ecosystem and the responsibility for the mental health of sole traders, micro business owners within that ecosystem, and the role that everybody else plays in their orbit. It's not, and it can never be a case of business owner, go off and heal thyself. That's not the model. That's not working.
Yeah, well, you'd be pleased to know that both Ange Martin and Beyond Blue are exhibiting at PHSCon in June. And so they'll hopefully be sharing a lot of these small business resources as well that you mentioned, yeah.
So what we've invited you on to talk about today, obviously, is your PhD project, which was looking into the psychosocial safety of micro business owners and small traders. So I think you've given us, I guess, the narrative around how you arrived at that point. What were the drivers behind this research?
The key drivers were, I guess, that we simply don't know it. We simply don't know enough about micro business owners and sole traders and the way they work to then go on and assume that existing frameworks in the way that we approach psychosocial health at work is actually relevant or applies to that cohort or that work group. And so what I really wanted to do was say, okay, so we understand these models or frameworks that we might use. So perhaps it's the integrated framework, perhaps it's the Thrive framework, perhaps it's the 3 pillars that we see in the NWI. We've got these models, but really, are they relevant or workable in the micro-business sole trader space? That was really the essence of it. And the reason that I wanted to know that is because when you work in this space for as long as I have, and I see the evolution of the NWI, I see the evolution of the Thrive framework, and at this very same time I read maybe an industry report that says, 62% of all small business owners are stressed, or I read a CommBank report that says cash flow is stressing, 56% of our small business, whatever it happens to be. Nothing's changing. So the question becomes, if we have the frameworks and we have resources, but we're still stressed and we're still not coping in small business, why? Why is that? And that was really, that really sent me on my path of my PhD.
Okay. Yep. Interesting.
So tell us about your methodology then that you deployed.
So this was a bit of a process. So I sort of explored a number of different methods, and I ended up, because we don't know enough about micro business owners and sole traders specifically, because this is an emerging theory regarding psychosocial health for those 2 groups, I decided that I would apply a grounded theory method because it was an emerging theory that I would be working on. And in particular, I looked at constructive grounded theory, which is Sharmez's model, really. And the reason that I did that was because Sharmez argues that the role of the researcher is as much a part of the findings as the research itself, and that we must acknowledge that they're an integral part of the research process. And so because I brought to the table 12 years of experience working in this space as a small business mental health advocate, I had to recognise that it was in fact impossible for me to separate myself entirely from the process. And constructive, I should never pick a theory that I can't say the name of myself.
Hot tip.
You know what I mean, thank you. CGT. CGT provided me with a method to be able to acknowledge myself, and use that and draw on that, because grounded theory is actually about doing comparative analysis on a constant basis. It's about really being able to question the data by comparing examples, experiences from one participant or one candidate to the other, and I was able to do that and then bring in part of my prior experience, my understanding of theory, to change things up if I needed to. And in fact, that's what I did along the process.
Yeah, terrific.
So it was like interviews? What sort of approaches did you take there?
So it was qualitative. It was obviously CGT, qualitative process that I selected, and it was semi-structured interviews with 34 sole traders or micro business owners, but they had to have been in business for 2 or more years, so not in the startup phase. And that was important to me because, one, I felt that there was some good research out there happening for the startup or that entrepreneurial startup stage of business. And secondly, because once you get past that 2-year stage, and I chose 2 years because I felt that I'd get greater access to participants at that stage. once we went to that, the business was more established, and the realities of everyday psychosocial hazards that they may be facing were perhaps more typical of a day and not typical of the realities of trying to get a business off the ground. It's different.
Yeah. Were there any industries that maybe were more represented in that group?
Yes, there were. There was certainly a lot of those working in the professional services sector, so accountants, business consultants. There was quite a number working in that space, but there was also small business owners from the creative space, so artists and videographers. And there was many more that were sole traders, self-employed, as opposed to micro business owners. And micro business, I use the ABS definitions. So micro business owners are less than 5 employees in the organisation. So, but I think we were at about 70% were sole traders or self-employed, and the remainder were micro business owners. Some were in retailing, but we had quite a few that were in professional services, which is not unusual, because when you look at the percentage of sole traders within certain sectors, I think it was reflective of where we would find individuals working within industry.
Do you need more psych health and safety in your life? Then head over to the Flourish DX Academy for several free on-demand e-learning courses. If you're an internal professional, follow Flourish DX on Eventbrite to register for any of our free fortnightly interactive webinars. Our flagship professional practice program is also exclusively available for internal professionals. The 12-week course blends theory, applied practice, and interaction with other professionals through live lectures and a monthly community of practice session. Find out more about all these learning opportunities or inquire about a bespoke in-house training at the Flourish DX Academy. www.45003.org. Now back to this episode. So what did you find in the end?
Okay, so how long have we got? Okay, so
give us the highlights package, Leanne. What are the key findings? Okay. Not everything you found.
Yeah.
Actually, how long did your PhD research take, Leanne?
5 years.
Yeah. So maybe not everything you learnt in 5 years.
Okay, because you could actually just switch off and you've gone and made a cup of coffee and I'm still talking. Yeah, that's right. Okay, so look, if to keep it, I guess, simple, I looked at the frameworks and that we currently have. I actually looked at the Safe Work framework. I looked at the integrated model. I looked at the Thrive framework, and I looked at NWI. And then I said, what are the elements of these frameworks that I can actually recognize or map so that I can just use one as a starting point? And what I did was I mapped those frameworks against the NWI framework and said, okay, so we've got 3 key pillars that we're, addressing, and I'm sure everybody's so familiar with, that whole notion around protect and promote and respond. And then I looked at how they all map in together. But then I took it the next step and said, what are the underpinning theories for each of these frameworks? So, for example, if we look at self-determination theory, we look at job demand control, effort-reward imbalance, and started to think about how do those theories, and went off and did within the literature review, looked at how do those theories actually work if you don't have employees. So how do they apply for an actual sole trader, for example? So I use that as the basis of helping to structure the semi-structured interviews, I guess. And what was really interesting was when I started to ask the questions of these sole traders or micro business owners about work and the structure of work, many of them told me about how they went into self-employment. Quite often they were trying to achieve job flexibility. They were wanting to work for themselves, have the freedom of choice to manage the way they worked and how they worked. And I was getting that type of response quite a bit in the initial interviews. And so when I went back off and did a bit more research and and thought, doesn't really make sense here with what I'm reading in terms of industry analysis. So, for example, if I were to look at those Treasury reports, so it's 2 Treasury reports done, one in 2020, one in 2022, and looking at the level of stress that was occurring in the small business sector, I couldn't marry what people were telling me about enjoying job flexibility yet still being stressed. And so that actually prompted me to reframe the way I asked questions. And so when I went back to my participants, when they said to me, I love my job freedom, I love the fact that I can go for a walk on a Wednesday morning when I know everyone else is at work and I can choose to do that, that's great. Well, then I would say to them, okay, so let's, for example, let me give you an example. Say I was talking to a graphic designer and they said they cited that type of job freedom, that they could choose when they worked and how they did that. I said to them, okay, so let's take a hypothetical that maybe you're doing a landing page for a large organisation. It's due on the Friday. That organisation comes back to you and says, oh, I'm really sorry, Leanne. We now need it on the Wednesday. We've got to have it sooner. We've got to have it on the Wednesday. Would you actually say to that large organisation, I'm really sorry, but I'm out on a Wednesday. I'm unable to deliver at that time. Or would you change and deliver the job on the Wednesday? Well, those that were experiencing higher degrees of, say, stress or anxiety in their workplace typically would be the ones saying to me, well, actually, yeah, I just have to change what I'm doing because I don't want them to think I can't do the job, or I want future work from them, or they're a new customer. I want to prove that I'm perhaps a bit bigger than they think I am, and I'm very capable. So when I began asking those types of questions in a slightly different way, what that uncovered was when we talk about job control as a sole trader, the question becomes who ultimately has control? And quite often it is not the business owner who's determining how they work and when they work. It's actually the client. So the client determines control. But when we go back, and this is one example, when we go back and look at, say, the NWI framework, and we look at concepts like job control or self-determination theory that underpin that notion of protect around job design, where do we see acknowledging control of an external party or an external stakeholder on the work of somebody who is self-employed? So I think the crux of my find, and I've got many examples around that. So we talk about autonomy. Van Gelderen, as a researcher, particularly his paper in 2016, Van Gelderen really started to explore this notion of autonomy in self-employed people, where we say, well, we need to have job freedom, we need to be able to determine that. But how does that work when you're working at home in your office? And so it's too often, for example, in these interviews with these solopreneurs, they would be saying my social norms, my social indicators for when work happens and doesn't happen is when my partner arrives home late at night and I hear the door go and I suddenly go, oh my goodness, at 6 o'clock I need to stop finishing work. So what kind of autonomy are we really talking about here? Is it autonomy to work 18 hours instead of 10, for example? So, and when we look at these frameworks, I think it's a mistake to actually say that these frameworks apply to every work environment, when clearly our experience of the concepts that underpin these frameworks can be quite different dependent on our work environment. And so my core argument from the PhD research has been perhaps we need to rework, and maybe I hope Angela doesn't listen to this, okay? Perhaps we need to rework our understanding of these frameworks and flag the context of the work environment in which they are optimal. So part of the findings and the recommendations that I made as a result of my PhD was that we need to take these models and look at them in the context of the business ecosystem of a sole trader, self-employed person, micro business owner. So, for example, we need to redefine autonomy. Quite often, autonomy when you're a sole trader is intermittent. So I get to enjoy autonomy, but I do that between clients. I don't get given or structured a job design that gives me autonomy, because often I'm beholden to what my clients or other stakeholders want. I do get autonomy, I do get it, but it's intermittent. So we need to start thinking about educating sole traders, micro business owners about how to maximize, get real, how to maximize intermittent autonomy. We need to educate MBOs and stakeholders about power. And nowhere do I see power being addressed in these frameworks. But in fact, for a small business owner, we need to start talking about power as a tool to care for your mental health. Because if I'm in a position, and this is where we will come back to things like self-determination theory and job demand control, because if I was to take those theories and apply them to the reality of how I work, if I don't have the right tools in place to equal the relationship, then I'm going to feel like I have less power than my client, for example. And less power equals less control. And we know from the research that if I don't have job control, what do I have? Less engagement, stress, anxiety at work, right? So I have a greater risk of psychosocial ill health. So the question becomes, how do we balance that relationship? And this is where these frameworks need to look beyond the internal systems in an organization and start to say, for these types of organizations, we need to extend the framework to the business ecosystem. So it's our responsibility, all of us, you, Jason, you, Joelle, Angela, myself, it's our responsibility to be going to the big end of town, to the corporates and to government, and to be saying to them, do you understand how your policies and procedures will impact the job control of the sole traders and the micro business owners who contract to you? Because at the moment, I don't think they do, and I don't think they've ever been expected to. So I'm not saying that they're at fault. I'm saying there's a whole area of education that's required out here, because I think if we had, for example, I'm just randomly picking it. So if we had a CommBank that said, we're going to put a policy in place that says if we contract to a sole trader or a micro business owner to do a landing page for us, then we're going to have a policy in place that says, if I need to change a due date on that landing page deliverable, I must give that person at least 5 days notice, because I need to give them some control around the way they might have to manage the rest of their work. Whereas at the moment, we don't have those systems in place. We don't have a framework that includes the other stakeholders who play such a critical role in our mental health. We don't have that in the existing frameworks that we use to understand mental health at work.
Yeah, Leanne, you make some really important points there that aren't just relevant for micro business owners, but also for larger business. I remember Chris Doyle, who was at Lendlease, was talking about like consulting with government about procurement policies, and setting deadlines for large construction projects, right? Which basically meant that people had to work 7 days a week in order to meet deadlines, and there would be people who. And then it was like uneven in terms of the comparison between contractors who were bidding for work because some were very happy to work 7 days a week, whereas others like, no, we actually need to provide rest breaks for our workers. And then the other thing you're talking about is that job insecurity as well. I guess that kind of leads into, like, if I don't take this work, I might not have enough income to support my family or whatever. So I just need to say yes to everything, right?
Right. And that's actually the core reason why I've started Rereadable. I'm not trying to plug Rereadable, but Rereadable.
No, we'll give a plug. Yeah.
That's one of the core reasons, because I did interview sole traders, micro business owners who had tough days. We all do, right? We know it's a continuum. They all have tough days, but they would go, I've had a bad day, but I get up and it's all fine, versus the ones who went, this is really getting me down and I'm truly not coping. So the question then became, what are you doing that gives you a greater sense of job control and power? And what that was that they had the very pragmatic, systemized processes in place that gave them leverage to have good discussions with corporates, their customers, whoever that happens to be, without feeling at risk of losing the business. So those sorts of things were things like they had a very good terms of trade, they had client agreements in place, they understood cash flow forecast, so that it was not a sense of feast or famine. It was not, I have to say yes to Joe because I need to pay my mortgage this month. They understood cash flow. They understood sales funnels and sales forecasts. So in fact, it's learning and competence that was another critical part of my PhD findings. So I had two key areas. One was around this notion of feeling powerful and having control. The other finding was around connecting with others, and that had to do with learning, building up competence, and in that connection with others was the incidental learning. I go to a networking meeting, I sit next to someone who has a great idea, I leave, and I can use that in my own business, that kind of stuff, the value of connections. And so I think it's not, yes, it's a whole ecosystem, but there are things that we can do ourselves as sole traders that helps to give us. And in fact, I was the research assistant on a longitudinal study that we did, the University of Newcastle, sponsored by CIRA in New South Wales. And we looked at the effect of COVID and the lockdowns over a long period of time for small business in New South Wales. And one of the findings that came out of that was the ability for those small business owners to use, the tenancy legislation that was introduced at that time, where it was legislated that you could not evict a small business owner out of their premises for a particular period. Small business owners were very good at citing that legislation to help give them power to stay in their workplace. So in fact, when I look at the changes that have happened to the Work Health and Safety Act, and particularly when I looked at, and Jim Kelly's just going to shake his head when he listens to this as well, he's going to go, Leanne Faulkner, what are you doing, Jason? Okay, so anyway, when I look at that, I would like to hope that we get to a stage where we look at the changes in legislation so that a sole trader and micro business owner actually doesn't see it as more red tape for them. They actually see it as a way of giving them power in a workplace. So they get to the point where they're able to cite legislation and say to a Woolworths, for example, who's taking 90 days to pay an invoice, do you know you're actually breaking the law here? Because you're a PCBU, I'm a PCBU, and you're actually causing me, we have a relationship, you're actually causing me stress and anxiety in the workplace, and you're actually breaking the law. And I think we need to get to the stage where we can educate sole traders and educate, in fact, the inspectors, the safe work inspectors, to use this legislation to help these, sometimes, they don't have as much power or control, to help them actually find a way to have that discussion that doesn't put future work at risk. And legislation's a beautiful lever for that. It's not me, it's the law. You're actually breaking the law, and I just want to flag that with you. Does that make sense? So there's a whole range of opportunity here that probably starts at addressing the frameworks as we know it, that opens up the conversation and includes many others to help us together. So even though we've got new access, it's great. Even though we've got a head for business, it shouldn't be about sending me off to go and get, fixed because I'm stressed. It should be, well, what are you doing? What are you doing? Just like the frameworks provide for an employee.
Yeah, so I think you've got some really varied findings there at different levels of focus, right? So there's things around at that sole trader level, how do you leverage those opportunities for flexibility and for control when they come? But then you're also kind of looking more at that macro level as well. If you're a big business and you're engaging a small business or a sole trader, what are your obligations in that relationship under the law? Yeah.
Exactly. And what I should probably do then is send you some of the models that I produce as a result of these findings that actually show both of those levels there, Joelle. So probably would demonstrate it far more easily than I'm doing today.
Yeah, if you can send those like via a hyperlink, we can embed them in the show notes as well, so listeners can have a look at that. Yeah, fantastic. So what action would you love to see as a result of your research?
I would like to see the drivers around the frameworks that are used. And I have to keep this broad because there are several frameworks that are used. There's no one definitive one. So the developers of the frameworks to be looking at, read my work, read the PhD, please, and then say, okay, what changes do we need to do to these frameworks to make them inclusive of all workplaces, not just typically employee-bound places? Yeah, that's it.
Well, Leanne, at this point in time in the podcast, we ask the guests the same question every time. And this is, what are your hopes for the future of workplace mental health?
Oh, look, my hopes are that that we're able to encourage and adopt a model where support happens for everyone, regardless of the work context that you happen to be in. That's my hope.
Nice.
And last question for you today, Leanne. Do you have words of advice for listeners who want to work in the area of psychological health and safety?
Yes. Please take the time to understand the underpinning theories. I think Lucy Brogden would say it so well when she said that workplace mental health is so much more than a yoga mat and a basket of fruit. Please understand the underpinning theories. I think psychosocial safety climate and the work in that area about understanding that it's so much more than just a particular practice. It's about the culture, it's about the climate. And I think that's possible even for sole traders, just that climate includes other stakeholders.
Yep, fantastic.
Well, Leanne, thank you so much for coming on. Your research is very important. Like you say, half of workplaces in Australia are small businesses or sole traders. So, I'm glad someone's looking out for the little guy. I was there once myself. So it's great to see some really practical research being done in this area and great insights being shared. So thank you for coming on.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's been a thrill.
Awesome. Well, listeners, that brings us to the end of this episode. Remember, we do record these over video when we have the interviews with our guests, and you can catch all those videos on the Flourish DX YouTube channel. You'll also find that we take snippets of these and put them on the Flourish DX LinkedIn page. So follow along there and do connect in with Joelle and myself if you're not already, if you want to continue the conversation. But that's it for today. We'll catch you next episode.
You've been listening to the Psych Health and Safety Podcast. To stay up to date with the latest on psychological injury prevention, follow Flourish DX on LinkedIn and subscribe to the Psych Health and Safety Podcast at www.psychealthandsafety.com.